Welcome to Diplomatic Channel. I'm Amarachi Ubari. This week, President Muhammadu Buhari nominates former Minister of Finance, Mrs. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, for Director General of the World Trade Organization election next year. Plus, this weekend, Swedes and Nigeria celebrated their National Day virtually because of COVID-19 restrictions. However, we discussed with Ambassador Carl Michael Grants on his country's relations with Nigeria and their fight against the COVID-19 pandemic. Well, let's begin with a quick check on other discussions in diplomatic circles. More Black Lives Matter protests are still taking place all over the world as citizens make changes to social structures. Protesters tore down a statue of 17th century slave trader Edward Colston in Bristol on Sunday. The global protests have been largely peaceful in the UK, but all through last week, at least 27 policemen were injured. China's Vice Foreign Minister Ma Xiaozhu says the country's relations with many other countries have been consolidated and improved as they supported each other during the COVID-19 pandemic. On Sunday, China issued a white paper on the country's battle against COVID-19 entitled Fighting COVID-19, China in Action. Ma said the white paper recorded some of the valuable help, support and assistance provided by other countries when China's epidemic situations were severe. Finally, Egypt's President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has announced an initiative for Libya. He made the announcement flanked by the war-torn nation's Eastern Commander Khalifa Haftar, proposing an elected leadership council and a ceasefire starting June 8th. President al-Sisi says the plan included a call for the negotiations in Geneva and for the exit of all foreign fighters from Libya. Welcome back. Nigeria is gradually making her way back to leadership positions on the international scene, assuming all goes well in the World Trade Organization election for Director General next year. President Muhammadu Buhari has nominated former Finance Minister Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala for the position.
The 65-year-old economist and international development expert is one woman who has never stopped being on the move. She bags a 25-year career at the World Bank as a development economist, rising to the number 2 position of managing director, with oversight responsibility for the World Bank's $81 billion operational portfolio in Africa, South Asia, Europe and Central Asia. Twice served as Nigeria's finance minister under 2 different presidents, Olusegun Obasanjo in 2003 and Goodluck Jonathan in 2011, with an array of wins, including spearheading negotiations with the Paris Club that led to the wiping out of Nigeria's $30 billion debt, including the outright cancellation of $18 billion with the support of the World Bank and the IMF to the federal government of Nigeria. She helped build an electronic management platform, the Government Integrated Financial Management and Information System, including the Treasury Single Account and the Integrated Payroll and Personal Information System, helping to curtail corruption in the process, among others. After serving the Nigerian government among other positions, she co-chaired the Global Commission for the Economy and Climate for Effective Development Cooperation. She founded Nigeria's first indigenous opinion research organization, NOI Polls, and founded the Center for the Study of Economies of Africa, a development research think tank based in Abuja. Mrs. Okonjo-Iweala is currently chair of the board of Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, a member of boards of Standard Chartered plc and Twitter Incorporation, and was recently appointed as African Union Special Envoy for the World Health Organization's Access to COVID-19 Tools Accelerator. Her nomination by President Muhammadu Buhari came in a diplomatic tone, informing all member countries' embassies and permanent missions. The president said he was communicating the country's decision to withdraw the candidacy of Yono Frederick Aga for the election. He did not give any reasons for the withdrawal, But the nomination of Okonjo-Iweala has been challenged by the Egyptian government, which has sent a letter to the Ministerial Committee on Candidatures for the election to reject Mrs. Okonjo-Iweala's nomination, saying the withdrawal of Mr. Aga's candidature meant Nigeria forfeited her chance to participate in the race. In a memo by the Egyptian government, it said, as far as it was concerned, 3 candidates representing Benin Republic, Egypt and Nigeria had already obtained the endorsement of the Executive Council to contest the position for WTO Director General as at February 2020. It named the candidates to include Eloy Leroux of the Republic of Benin, Abdul Hamid Mamdou of the Arab Republic of Egypt, and Mr. Yonov Aga of Nigeria. However, on May 20, 2020, the WTO General Council Chair David Walker of New Zealand informed members that the appointment process for the next Director General of WTO will formally commence on June the 8th, with nominations accepted from that date until July the 8th, 2020.
Let's speak to Executive Director, Carry Assets Limited, Mr. Johnson Chukwu, about this. Mr. Chukwu, thank you for joining us on Diplomatic Channel. What do you make of Mrs. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala's nomination by the Nigerian government over Mr. Yonov Aga, who had been previously nominated by Nigeria for the same position?
Thank you, Amarachi, for having me. I think what Nigeria is doing is putting its best foot forward. We know the pedigree of Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala. She has been a 2-time Minister of Finance. She has been the managing director of the World Bank. So I believe what Nigeria has done is to review its nomination, and it now believes it has to send forth the person who is likely going to win the vote of other countries, other WTO countries. And I believe, given the profile of Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, Nigeria's decision to withdraw Mr. Ambassador Aga for Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala was in the best interest of the country. And I mean, we must also always go to a competition, global competition, with our best 11, and she happens to be one of our best 11.
Mr. Aga is currently one of 4 deputy directors of the WTO, first being appointed in October of 2013 and then reappointed for a second term October 2017, with his tenure ending next year, October. How significant is it for Nigeria holding on to this position? But more importantly, how significant is it for Mr. Aga to be thought to be replaced by someone with such a pedigree as Mrs. Okonjo-Iweala?
What I would say is that, with all due respect to Ambassador Aga, he must have done a good job to have been renominated by the country for the second time, which is about a lapse. But I believe Nigeria as a nation must have considered that if we have to claim that position, we need to send our best candidates. And like you rightly pointed out, the kind of pedigree that Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala has is so intimidating that it will be difficult for anybody in Africa or even in the world globally to compete with her for the WTO position. So if we had insisted on Ambassador Aga, it is possible that the other candidates from the, other African countries are presenting candidates. Egypt and Benin Republic are both presenting candidates for the same position among the African countries. It is possible that one of these candidates could have also been in a strong position to compete for that post. But with Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, with her pedigree, having been a Minister of Finance in Nigeria on 2 occasions, she was also at some point the Minister of External Affairs. She has been the managing director of the World Bank. Nigeria had actually wanted her to occupy the position of the managing director of the IMF. And with such intimidating profile, it is clear that should her candidate of herself, she is most likely to go to play that position, irrespective of where the competition will come from any part of the world.
And Egypt obviously wants this position. They have a candidate in there, and they've found Nigeria foul on her decision to replace Mr. Aga with Mrs. Okonjo-Iweala, citing one of the laws of the WTO, which we now understand was modified in May. But are their claims and calls for disqualification valid?
Well, like you rightly pointed out, the basis of which Egypt is clamoring for the disqualification of Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala is a law that has been amended. So that the basis of that has actually been already changed. That has already changed. Obviously, they are holding on to an old law. But most importantly, I understand the feeling of Egypt. I mean, some of these our fellow North African countries feel President Nigeria occupies 2 of the sensitive African multilateral agencies, African Finance Development Bank and Afrexim Bank. But if you look back in history and you consider the fact that no Nigeria has actually occupied a global position of the size of WTO. Egypt at some point had the UN Secretary General, Mr. Boutros Ghali. Nigeria has never occupied such a position. And I think other African countries should cede or concede this WTO position to Nigeria, irrespective of how they feel.
And finally, what sort of image do you think that this portrays of Nigeria, knowing there was just about a week ago or so that Mr. Akiwumi Adesina's position at the AFDB was also threatened?
Well, what I would say is that we are actually stepping back into the global space. At some point, we had pulled back and it looked like at some point we were timid. The issue of Mr. Adesina's issues with the African Development Bank has to a large extent been addressed by the board, although they have reopened the investigation. I want to believe that having been cleared initially by the board will most likely address that issue conclusively when the report of the investigator is out. But the most important thing for me is that as a big country with over 200 million population, accounting about 15% of African population, we need to assert ourselves in the international space. And we need to present also our best candidate. Of course, we know that Mr. Adesina is one of the best candidates, best personalities from this country with strong CV, with strong experience, and nobody can fault his competence level. And even the issues, he has actually come to the president of the country to say these are top charges, and he has foolproof evidence that he was not culpable or was not guilty of any of those allegations. And we also know the kind of pedigree that Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala has. So I want to believe that eventually, as a nation, we will begin to express ourselves internationally, and we are beginning to send our best food, best support to the global institutions, and we need to assert ourselves as a country.
Mr. Johnson Ojukwu, always a pleasure speaking with you. Thanks again for joining us on Diplomatic Channel. Saturday, June 6th was the National Day of Sweden, a holiday observed annually and by Swedes around the world. Celebration of the day began in 1916 at the Stockholm Olympic Stadium in honor of King Gustav Vasa in 1523, as this was considered the foundation of modern Sweden. Prior to 1983, when the Swedish National Day was celebrated as such, the day was marked as Swedish Flag Day. The day was renamed the Swedish National Day by the Riksdag, the national legislature and supreme decision-making body of Sweden. This year, many Swedes celebrated behind closed doors, listening to the congratulatory message of the Prime Minister, Stefan Löfven, who reminded them about the global pandemic and how they must pull through.
But we have an opportunity to emerge from this crisis stronger. If we have learned anything, it is that the actions of every individual are important. We also see that the need for international collaboration is increasing because no country can tackle this alone. The virus knows no national borders. We have to work together, take responsibility, and stay the course. When the situation allows, we'll see each other again.
The Swedish ambassador to Nigeria, Mr. Carl Michael Grants, reiterated the Prime Minister's message, encouraging Swedes and friends of Sweden to join in the celebrations online.
Usually we spend it with family and friends, but this year we can't because of the COVID-19. So why don't you join us for this virtual smorgasbord online, live.sweden.se.
There is an increasing interest and demand from Nigeria to interact with Sweden and Swedish companies, a sign of strong trade relations with the Swedish government. Some Swedish telecoms and ICT companies, beauty brands and construction and power companies have existed in Nigeria for years, and the country continues to seek more open doors to trade and economic partnerships with Nigeria. We'll take a short break. We'll be right back. We have joining us the Swedish ambassador to Nigeria, Ghana, Cameroon, and the ECOWAS, Ambassador Carl Michael Grants. Thank you for joining us on Diplomatic Channel.
Thank you very much.
And congratulations on Sweden celebrating another national day for a country that has an over 1,000-year history, continuous history, that is. How old did you say the country is now?
That's a good question. It's about 1,000 years, I would say, the Middle Ages in Europe. But it was a gradual process, of course, like every country. But roughly a monarchy of 1,000 years old, yes.
Now, apart from this celebration which is happening with you being so far away from home, and because of the coronavirus, everything is happening virtually. All the celebrations from around the world, from Swedes around the world, and even in Stockholm. How did the Swedish community in Nigeria mark the day?
Well, usually there's a big party in my residence and my garden, the garden of the embassy. But of course, this year, because of the COVID-19, there was no such thing. I was completely alone in the embassy yesterday. But we had a quite successful, I would say, virtual National Day online. 24 hours streaming from Sweden. Fantastic program, I would say. Made by the Swedish Institute. So I think that we could gather virtually to celebrate our National Day.
Speaking of the coronavirus, Ambassador Grants, how do you rate your country's response to the epidemic?
Well, this is never seen and never heard of in modern times. It is unprecedented, and it is a global crisis, that's for sure. We think that only international cooperation can solve this. We have to fight the pandemic together. So it's no secret that the WHO is very important to Sweden. They got some extra money from us this year. But of course, we have different phases in different countries. Sweden has been hardly hit, that's for sure. But we're trying to cope with it and to learn from our mistakes, because there might be a second wave or even a third wave later on.
Yeah, and speaking of those mistakes, unfortunately, Sweden is one of those countries in Europe that did not impose a lockdown. And now the state epidemiologist of the Public Health Agency who led the country's COVID-19 response says that they should have done more to stop the spread of the coronavirus. What do you make of this realization coming now pretty late, into this global pandemic?
Well, I think that, each country has its own way to cope with this. We compare ourselves, of course, to other countries. On the other hand, it's difficult to compare because different countries are in different phases. But it's quite obvious that we had quite a lot of deaths in Sweden, too many deaths. Of course, each death is a tragedy for the family members. And that was mostly in care homes for elderly people. Not unique for Sweden, I would say. You can see the same pattern in other countries as well. That was a failure, but we're trying to learn from it. And we can see that the deaths coming from care homes are on the decline, definitely. I just got the new figure today and we had 3 more deaths. So we're trying to learn from our mistakes and cope with this in a better way. But it's a continuous process, I would say.
Is Sweden also on board on this vaccine race, becoming one of the first few countries in Europe to actually find a vaccine to the coronavirus? And are you also looking at experimenting with drugs such as hydroxychloroquine, which the WHO has now said does not cure the coronavirus? So what medical expertise is Sweden applying, to help curb this coronavirus and to join the rest of the world in helping to find a solution to the end of the pandemic?
As you may know, Sweden is quite advanced when it comes to medicine. And the Karolinska Institute in Stockholm is one of the world's best ranked, at least, institutes for research in medicine. And there are a lot, it's really a race all over the world to get the vaccine. And I think there are 10 or 15 different attempts at the same time. So we'll see. But there is also one big company, AstraZeneca, Swedish-British. They have a big project to try to solve this. But it's not only about vaccines, it's also about medicine to cope with people who are already ill by this dreadful disease. And then the vaccine is a different thing, actually. And we'll have to work on both.
But some countries have also been accused of politicizing the coronavirus. I mean, you see the spat between China and the US. The US wanting China to take responsibility for the coronavirus, and other countries trying very hard not to take sides. Is it possible to separate politics from humanity at this time?
That is a good question. Obviously not, regrettably, if you look at the world situation, and you mentioned yourself China and the US. But we have to focus on the virus, I think, and how to cope with it, and to fight it, and to get the vaccine and the different medicines needed. So we have to focus together, international cooperation and the WHO once again.
Let's talk about Nigeria-Sweden relations. And I see from the Swedish website in Nigeria that Swedes use 54.5% renewable energy, mainly water and biomass. How is Sweden and Nigeria partnering in this regard to help Nigeria further along in her quest for renewable energy?
Well, renewable energy is really one of the main sectors when it comes to economic cooperation between Nigeria and Sweden. We think that we have perhaps solutions in Sweden, business solutions, companies that could provide solutions to Nigeria, at the same time respecting the energy mix and the political choices by the Nigerian people. But we have to, it's a global challenge actually to cope with climate change, and renewable energy is one, I would say, crucial part of this. But it's also about technical advancements to find new technical solutions to cope with this. So, but it's really together with transport and city planning. We could talk about smart cities, waste management. It all comes together, actually. So it has to be planned together.
And we've been in diplomatic relations with Sweden for a long time. Talk to us about where we are in the partnership diplomatically between the two countries.
I, as a Swedish ambassador, would like to see more people coming to Nigeria from Sweden, more companies coming. We have, of course, Swedish businesses, the large ones, ABB, for instance, talking about energy, Atlas Copco, Sandvik, mining, but also other companies like Oriflame, for instance, a cosmetic company. Perhaps not the first thing that you think of when you hear Sweden, but they are very successful in Nigeria, having more than 40,000, mostly female consultants, earning money and by selling cosmetics. So Ericsson, of course, telecommunication, that's actually the biggest company, I think, a Swedish company in Nigeria, headquarters in Lagos. So I think that more companies should come to Nigeria and discover the potential of Nigeria, this big country with more than 200 million people, which is also a big market, of course. So, but we're trying our best. That's part of our mission of the Swedish Embassy to connect people from Sweden and Nigeria to cooperate in different ways, in different sectors, also in cultural sector.
Ambassador Carl Michael Grants, thank you again for joining us on Diplomatic Channel. And once again, a happy celebration to you and to the people of Sweden.
Thank you very much for taking your time. It was a pleasure and a privilege. Thank you.
This is where we end the program today. I'm Amarachi Ubani. As always, I'm eager to hear from you. The addresses to reach me on are on your screen. I'll see you next time.